On March 26, 2026, politicians across India gathered to celebrate the birth anniversary of Emperor Ashoka. Ashoka built an empire on the idea of an inclusive, unified society. For thousands of years, his reign has served as the baseline for what a harmonious Indian civilization should look like. The politicians leading these celebrations are often the same people fracturing the country. They deliver their speeches praising Ashoka's unity, then win their elections by deliberately dividing voters along caste and religious lines. They strip ancient symbols of their meaning and paste them onto partisan rallies. The chakra, a symbol of righteous duty, is reduced to a backdrop for campaigns driven entirely by identity politics. Leaders broadcast polarizing slogans to their base, ignoring the fact that 80% of the population is simply fighting for basic survival. India has a functioning blueprint for a fair democracy. The people in charge are actively choosing to ignore it to maintain their grip of power. This system is not failing by accident. It is intentionally hacked by a political class scraping off the cream of power for themselves. One set of operators focuses on polarization. They manufacture animosity between different castes and religions to keep voters distracted from the actual lack of governance. Another faction poses as false saviors. They campaign on lifting up Dalits, the historically marginalized communities outside the traditional caste system, and backward classes. But once in office, they immediately restrict wealth and leadership opportunities to their own families. This flowchart maps exactly how the state's resources are manipulated. The funds meant for the struggling 80% are diverted from the base and hoarded by a handful of elite political families. These families then take that looted wealth and trickle a fraction of it back down during the next election cycle. They buy just enough influence to guarantee they return to power. Whether the tactic is religious division or dynastic hoarding, the math ends up exactly the same: widespread inequality and a hollowed-out democracy. To understand how far the system drifted, we must look back at the Republic's initial promise and its original operating manual, the Indian Constitution. The document lays out specific criteria for leadership. It demands the enforcement of fundamental rights and the application of directive principles. Directive principles are constitutional guidelines instructing the government to create laws that ensure social and economic justice. This diagram illustrates the structural conflict between the rulebook and reality. On the left are the constitutional pillars. On the right, the model tactics of nepotism and polarization collide directly with those foundational structures, actively weakening them. Running the government based on identity politics is a measurable, systemic violation of the Constitution's core logic. So, can a political campaign actually survive in India without relying on the traditional levers of caste, religion, or dynastic wealth? Social and political thinker Jawaharlal argues that it is entirely possible, but it requires a complete operational reset of how a party functions. He points to the Samyak Party as a working model. Samyak translates roughly to proper or balanced, and the party's entire platform is built on discarding identity politics to run purely on constitutional code. The strategy relies on treating the Constitution as the supreme, unalterable text for every single policy decision. When the legal framework is actually applied without bias, the machinery of the state gets locked into place and runs exactly as engineered. For this to work, voters have to change their behavior too. They must stop accepting short-term bribes and actively demand a system that enforces constitutional boundaries. This domestic reform carries a broader significance. While various regions of the world remain trapped in cycles of war over religious dominance, a system anchored strictly in the Indian Constitution provides the specific mechanics needed for a multi-faith population to live together through shared civil laws. When citizens reject the hacks of identity and enforce constitutional standards, the equitable society envisioned by both Emperor Ashoka and the Republic's founders stops being a campaign slogan and starts being how the country actually works.